Hi everyone, welcome to our VJ Day Discovery Box lesson. And in today's lesson, we are going to give you an intriguing insight into the war in the Far East through 6 objects. Yes, and we're going to be discovering the truly incredible stories behind those. My name is Yvonne Cadell. I work in the Poppyscotland Learning Team. As we're going through, if you like some of the objects or find them fascinating, please feel free to hit the like button or hit the heart button or leave me a comment down below. So to start, I am going to share my screen with you and give you a little glimpse of the objects or clues to the objects that we're going to be looking at today. There we go. And without any further delay, let's begin by opening our box. So, as you may know, between December 1941 and August 1945, Britain and its allies fought a bitter war against Imperial Japan. The war was fought in the air, in the sea and on land, in malaria-ridden jungles, in tropical heat against a bitter and tenacious enemy. And object number 1 is a Japanese good luck flag. And this was given to Japanese soldiers who were being deployed or about to go into battle. And the idea behind it was that they would give it to their friends, family and neighbours, and they would sign it with well wishes for them going away. As you can see, the Japanese characters are written in lines radiating outwards from the sun. And the general meaning of the well wishes was always the same: may your military fortunes be long lasting. Now, this particular flag was found in the West, in America. So how do you think it got there? Well, actually, during the war in the Far East, during the Second World War, Allied service personnel used to take these good luck flags from wounded or killed Japanese soldiers as mementos of war. And you can see here, I'll show you, we have some captured good luck flags by Australian troops, and another captured good luck flag from US Marines. So let's look a bit more at the flag again. In Japanese culture, when flags were written on, they became sacred, empowered objects, something that could protect you from forces unknown. And this wasn't a usual flag. It wasn't meant to be flown. It was meant to be carried in the breast pocket of the Japanese soldier to remind him of his duty. And in the flag as well are the virtues of Bushido, which is the Japanese code of honor. So what do you think of the flag? Have you seen anything like this before? And I've also got here a photograph of Rita Hayworth, the actress, holding one of the flags. So they were obviously popular war mementos. Do you think it's a grotesque object, maybe given its story or history, or just a fascinating insight into the Japanese soldier? You can let me know in the comments below. So moving on to the next story, which comes from, just to say about that one, when the Japanese good luck flags are discovered in the West, there is an effort made to return them to the family of the deceased Japanese soldier. Okay, so moving on, this is object 2, and it's a photograph, and it captures the moment when Britain surrendered Singapore to Imperial Japan on the 15th of February 1942. So at this point in the war, things are not going well for the Allies, and the jewel of the East, Singapore, has had to be surrendered. At this point in the war, a lot is not going well for the Allies, and Churchill later called the loss of Singapore the worst disaster and largest capitulation in British history. And so let's have a closer look at the photograph. Far right is General Percival, and he was in charge of the defence of Singapore. In the middle is a Japanese officer. Next to him is Brigadier Newbigging. He's holding the British Union Jack flag, which would then be given to the Japanese. And far left is Major Cyril Wilde, holding the white flag of surrender. And there's an interesting story. When they first started out walking, Major Wild threw down his flag and said, "This is stupid, let's go back." And that just gives you a little insight into his defiant nature, but he was overruled and asked to continue. But Major Wild was slightly different from the other men in the fighting in the Far East. He had lived in Japan. He was a fluent Japanese speaker because he worked for an oil company. And so he actually understood the Japanese mindset and the concept of Bushido. So at the meeting, Major Wild performs his duty as an interpreter, and there we are at the meeting. So you will see General Percival on the right and Major Cyril translating there. They were actually told they could only give yes or no answers at this meeting, and Percival says yes to the surrender. Afterwards, Major Cyril Wild is asked for the Union Jack by the Japanese. He tells them, because he can speak Japanese, that it's been burnt, but he's actually concealed it, and he continues to conceal it secretly from the Japanese during his time as a prisoner of war. And at the end of the war in August 1945, that same flag that was concealed by Major Wild was flown in Singapore Town Hall. So it's quite a history, and I've actually got a picture here of that same flag that's now in the Imperial War Museum. And Major Wild is a fascinating character. If I could talk more about him just for 1 second. He was known by the Japanese as the tall man who never slept, because he tirelessly fought or spoke up for his fellow POWs to try to improve their conditions. So he also was transferred to the Thai-Burma Railway, and he was there for about 3 years. And staying with the railway, moving on to our next object. Well, that's a picture of Major Cyril there. There he is. And our next object is a cup of rice. So we've got a cup of rice and the Burma Thai Railway. So what's the connection there? The Burma Thai Railway was a railway built by POWs and Asian conscripts, and the purpose of the railway was to connect Bangkok to Burma, to give the Japanese army a route for their supplies. Things weren't going so well for them in the Pacific, so they needed that land route via rail to connect to their armies there and hold on to the territory they gained in Burma. And a POW forced to work on that railway during their time in captivity was only given 1 cup of rice to eat in the morning before they went off to work at the railway. They were then able to take 1 cup with them as well. So that was all they had to eat that day. And then to lift, carry, pull, push so many heavy objects in tropical heat with no shoes, barely any water, wearing only a loincloth. One prisoner of war says if they had a shirt, they were lucky. If they had a hat, they were extremely lucky. So that's our cup of rice. And I'm just going to show you some pictures of the POWs getting their rice in the morning. They're very thin, as you can see. And here is a picture of the Thai-Burma Railway, all of the POW camps stretching all the way up the track of the railway. Here is a picture giving you just the scale and extent of that engineering feat that was being achieved. POWs working on the railway here. Which brings us to our next object staying at the railway, which was this, a saw. What do you think this saw was used for? Well, yes, you would be right. It was used to saw trees and create those railway sleepers that we see in so many of the photographs. Here's a picture here. So the Japanese had a huge pool of forced labour working on the railway, 200,000 Asian conscripts and over 60,000 Allied prisoners of war. There's a fact that for every sleeper on the railway, it cost the life of a prisoner of war, and 2 out of every 3 men died working on the railway. And the medics in the camps were under such constant stress to try and heal these men that were brutalised by the conditions they were working in and by the camp commanders themselves. They had to rely on makeshift medicine. Examples of that are using maggots to clean tropical ulcers in their legs, and cutting up clothing to make bandages. And our saw here, our metal saw, would be used during the day to cut trees at the railway line, and at the request of the camp doctor, brought back to the camp at night to be used in the medical hut for leg amputations. So dire conditions there. Our next object is called a blood cheat. Who do you think used to carry this? There might be a clue in the name, if you know a wee bit about the conflict. It was used by some Allied soldiers, some crack commando soldiers called the Chindits, and they used to infiltrate behind enemy Japanese lines. Their purpose was to cut communications and cause chaos. Here's a picture here. So they went off-road a lot of the time, and they inflicted heavy casualties and sustained heavy casualties. They were created by an eccentric British Army brigadier called Ord Charles Wingate. That's him there. So it was a successful project. And our blood, and that's the Chindits again there. I'm just going back to our blood cheat. It was written in 17 languages, and the purpose was, if one of the Chindits got separated from their unit, they would give it to a local person, and the message is, I'm an Allied soldier, I'm here to help free your country, please help me. Okay, and there's some Chindits crossing the river there. So moving on to our next object, which is 1,000 origami cranes. So this is a story of Sarako Sasaki, who was 2 years old when the atomic bomb went off in Hiroshima in 1945. Amazingly, her brother, her mother, and herself survived the blast. They thought that they were okay, but one day, 9 years later, Sarako developed painful swelling behind her ear, and she was diagnosed with leukemia and given between only 3 and 12 months to live. And she'd been a very active and athletic child. When she was in hospital, she recalled the legend that anybody who folded 1,000 paper cranes would be granted a wish. So with great enthusiasm, she started making paper cranes and wished to be healed and be able to run again. She actually achieved her ambitious goal of 1,000 cranes in 6 weeks. But unfortunately, her condition worsened. So she decided to keep folding. But in October 1945, she lost her battle. After that, her classmates wanted to create a memorial for her, and they raised a lot of money, and they managed to get built in 1958 this beautiful monument, which stands in Hiroshima today. There is Sarako at the top, she's holding a crane. And every year people visit this monument and leave paper cranes there in memory of their departed ancestors. So that's just a short glimpse into the absolutely incredible conflict of the war in the Far East. I hope you've enjoyed our lesson today and learning about our objects, and hope to see you next time. Okay, bye.